All right, so good evening, everyone. For those that don't know me, my name is Derek Ivancic. I'm the chapter president for the Cleveland Akron Canton ACF, and I am the co-chair for our upcoming competition here in March at Tri-C Downtown. And I thought it would be a great opportunity to share some best practices and have a little discussion at the end for competition. I know we have a lot of students potentially that want to compete for the first time, maybe some chefs that want to compete for the first time. So I think it's a great opportunity to go through kind of, the expectations and what it looks like to compete for the first time if you haven't before. A little bit of background about me. I've been in the profession for over 20 years. Started competing when I was 19, when I worked at a resort, and I've been competing off and on since then. Atlanta, competed in Myrtle Beach, and then a few times here in Cleveland, and then I've driven up to Michigan and competed as well. So it's been really helpful to me as a way to continue to grow in my career and test my skills, and then really I get fun out of it. I don't necessarily compete just for medals or just for glory, but I do it just to have fun and push myself and try new things. So I think it's a really valuable tool that we can use. And as a student, it's a great way to get yourself in front of chefs outside of your normal instructor or outside of your boss, and expand that and get a different viewpoint. Sometimes I think it's very helpful. So the chat's available if anyone wants to ask any questions in the chat as we go through. So specifically, our competition is coming up March 22nd and 23rd. It's a Friday, Saturday. I'm going to share my screen so you can see what I'm looking at. If I can, oh, here it is. So it's coming up Friday and Saturday, March 22nd, 23rd. We're offering a variety of categories: mystery basket, cold food, ice carving, student categories. So a quick run through of student categories. The most common student categories are going to be the K categories. It's called SK, and that's where you have the savory dish. We have SP, which is dessert. Those are probably going to be the most common that any student's going to do. We also have student ice carving, and a new category we created this year called the student wild card. And it's actually directed towards Ohio FCCLA students. So we will go through that in a little bit. And for professional categories, we have our mystery baskets from 1 course to 4 course. We have the K category, which is just like the SK, but for professionals. So that is, I like to call it like a signature dish, but sometimes it's referred to as contemporary cuisine. We have our cold food categories, which is A through E. And then our H category, which is ice carving. So we're going to have a variety of different categories that you can choose from. I always recommend, if you're a first-time competitor, that you would start with the professional KC category, or student would be the SK or SP categories. If anybody wants to enter into the chat what categories that they're thinking of competing in, if it's going to be dessert or savory, student or professional, just so I can kind of gear the review of that. But just to kind of start through I want to start through the most common categories and just give you an idea of what it's like, and then share some best practices. And I want to keep my part to like half hour or so, and then really open it up for some more discussion, Q&A, and hopefully I can answer some specific questions for you as you're competing potentially for the first time. So we're going to move to the professional culinary competition manual. I want to make sure that that's the one. Yep. Okay. That's what I'm sharing. So I put a link in the chat to the resources page of the ACF website. So if you go to acfchefs.org, there's a competition page that has all of this information. So cold food isn't very common, so I'm going to kind of skip over cold food. And cold food has its own set of requirements and rules, and it's a lot more complicated. So that you could almost have a whole call just on cold food and glazing. But I'm going to go right down to the, I'll go to K category first, because that's the simpler of it. So think of K category. It's going to be similar to when if you've done a certification, it's going to be really similar to that, because you bring all of your ingredients. Here we are. So you bring your ingredients, Everything is mise en place out already. As far as measuring, you know what you're making, you know your recipe, and you bring a recipe book with photos for the judges. So it's, very similar to a certification exam because you know what you have going in. So all K categories are based on the same timeline for professional hot food, savory cooking. So one of the main things that's required is you have to do fabrication of the protein there. So if you see, you have KC 1, 2, 3, and it goes on down the list. And you notice all of those require fabrication. So you can't bring just chicken breast. You have to bring a whole chicken, a whole duck. All of them you have a 15-minute setup window. So generally during that window, you're bringing in your equipment, you're loading your station, you're checking your oven, you're turning on your oven. You could fill pots with water. Some judges will allow you to boil water, but you can't combine any ingredients or do any vegetable prep or any kind of cooking of any sorts. But you can have your cutting board out, your knife out, you can have your chicken on your cutting board. You just can't do any actual work until the judges give you the okay to begin. So after your 15 minutes of setup, you have 60 minutes to fabricate and cook and 10 minutes for plate up, followed by 15 minutes for cleanup. So that 15-minute cleanup, you need to get your station exactly the way it was when it came in, sanitized, detailed, and you're out of there. If you've spilled anything on the floor and you couldn't clean it up during your time, make sure you clean that up. We will have assistance as far as dishwashers there. So if you have things that need to be washed, we'll have students and volunteers there to help. But you'll be able to, take care of all your dishes at the end. And when it comes to the 60 minutes plus 10, essentially think of it as you have 70 minutes total. You could be cooking into your 10-minute plate up window, but you don't want to present before that before you hit that plate up window. So, if you're 65 minutes into your cook time of your total 70 minutes, you're still sauteing vegetables and finishing up, you're okay. But you don't want to finish early and present your whole dish at the 50-minute mark, for example. Some competitions you have to stop at the end time no matter what. ACF allows you to go over on time, but then you start to get a point deduction. So just things to keep in mind. You have to balance that out. If you have some drips on the plate, but you're going to go over time on wiping it, is it better just to send it and not lose those points for going over on time? So, obviously if it's your first time competing, this is where I kind of push people to go, because you could do it with a whole chicken. It would be inexpensive to practice. And because you have a game plan going in, even though you're going into a new kitchen, you can practice in your own kitchen, your own commercial kitchen, and really know step-by-step what you need to do. You again, it's a new kitchen, so the oven might be slightly different, and you have to kind of, plan for that. And then I'll go through some of the specifics about Tri-C as far as what equipment you'll have. But that's just one thing that's important. And Chef Chris just had a note about there isn't a category for vegan in the K categories, but they're in the description. So this is a brand new competition manual. So it would be something you may have to search, do a Control F and look through and see if you can find something. There are specific healthy cooking categories. And if there's something that you're interested in doing, I can talk to the lead judge and get that cleared. So some things about KC that really can help you. Your herbs can be already chopped. Your garlic can already be chopped or minced, and your shallots can be already chopped or minced. Now, nothing can be mixed. So you would have maybe a little ramekin of chopped garlic, a little ramekin of brunoise shallots, a little dish of your different chopped herbs separated. So you can have that done. All your vegetables can be pre-peeled. So that's one less thing you have to do in your time frame. If you need to have beans soaked in advance, you can do that. So there are some things that you're allowed to do in advance, but you have to pretty much show every skill set there. So you can't have anything cut. So if you're going to bring peeled vegetables, they have to be in their whole form. So you still have to show knife skills there. If you choose to brine your protein, for example, or marinade, you can bring it brined or marinated, but you still have to show the process from fabrication to the marinade. And then you would do a swap out. So you would show the fabrication, make your brine, put your chicken breast in the brine and label a date, put in the cooler for future use, technically. And then you have your pre-brine one you did the day before, you pull it out, and that's the one you can serve. So there are some things you can, but for the most part, they want to see your skill set done. I would say your best the best advice is you need to practice and really understand what you can get done in the time frame allowed. And really, you'll know from practicing with the clock. Um, and then really think about sanitation and food safety and organization, because those are all really important parts, because you'll have your tasting judges. And for KC, your tasting judges are also the kitchen judges. So the same person that's watching you cook the entire time is going to be tasting your food. It's not blind. And you think about some things that we usually see competitors have a challenge with is they'll have things on their table that they don't need. And this goes for F category, dessert, all of them. For example, I was talking to students yesterday. If you don't need the blender until 40 minutes into your time, don't have it on top of your work surface at the beginning. Start with a clean slate. There's a video that I'm going to post the link in the chat so you guys all have it. But yesterday I did an SK category demonstration for a group of students at Tri-C that want to compete. So I did the full rundown in the hour and 10 minutes. Now, I only did 2 portions because it's important to note that a professional has to do 4 portions in the K category, but a student does 2. It's the same time frame, but a student does half as much work. So I just did a 2-portion SK category. So this video is available for anyone to watch, and you can kind of observe. And I talk through a lot of the things about organization, labeling. Like you can see on the screen, I have my pots labeled. So one thing I do is I label all my utensils with blue tape as I'm loading up the cart, so I know what I need. And then if there's something I have to leave my station to go get, I make sure to write it down, so I add that to my equipment list. I'm going to pull up my equipment list to show you here in a second. So I always like to put an equipment list together, so I kind of think through the whole process. How many saute pans do I need? Because you don't want to bring the whole kitchen if you don't need it. You just want to have what you really need to show that you're organized and you really practiced. And you want to have a timeline together too. One thing that helps me is I have a clock on my station, no matter what. And I have it where it counts down as a timer, and I make my timeline so it coincides with that timer. So if I have a 70-minute cook time, I have the timer set at 70 minutes and it counts down. And my timeline is based on that 70-minute countdown, if that makes sense. There is always going to be a clock in the kitchen, but you may not always be able to see it easily. Like, it's required to be easily seen, but if you have to stoop and bend and look to see it, or I'd rather have it on my station where I could just quickly glance over at it. So that's kind of K category, or KC in a nutshell. And so SK and KC are basically the same, for student professional. The main difference is students only make 2 portions of the same entree. Professionals make 4. Otherwise, the timing and a lot of the requirements are the same. Then you have KP1, KP2, and then there is a student version of each. So KP1 is a hot plated dessert. So same thing, 15-minute setup, 1 hour to cook, 10 minutes of plating, and 15 minutes for cleanup. 4 portions for professional, 2 for student. Then you have KP2, which is a composed cold plated dessert. So they get an extra 30 minutes of cook time because of adjusting for chilling and serving a cold plated dessert. And then it tells you for the KP, there's a lot of guidelines down below that kind of go into detail. So K categories, KC, KP, those are definitely the ones that I recommend people to do for the first competition. The F categories are kind of where a lot of chefs like to go after they practice and have done well in K categories. Because once you do well on K categories with something that you have practiced, then it's a good opportunity to move on to mystery basket categories. Now, we don't offer mystery baskets for students right now, Some chapters do. We didn't do that this year because it's kind of a custom category, but we do for professional. So our competition, we're doing F1 through F4. And essentially what that means is you have 1 course mystery baskets, 2, 3, and 4 course mystery baskets. So F1 will be, you just have to make an entree. Okay. F2 is a 2-course menu, starter and a main course. F3 is a 3-course menu. So you would have a starter, a second course, and a main course. And then F4 is a starter, a second, third, and a main course. No dessert is required. With more courses, you get more time, but then there's also more required ingredients. So even for like an F category, if it's your first time doing a mystery basket, even though it's challenging in the timing, I would recommend starting with like an F1 or F2. Because in F1, you're going to have a total of 1 hour and 20 minutes for cooking and service. Okay. So you get a little bit more time than a KC. And I know that's not a lot of time to come up with a mystery basket and do it. I've done F1s before. But the nice thing is you only have 1 course. So you know every ingredient has to be incorporated into that one dish. Some of the real challenge of an F3 and F4 is when you have 6 or 8 ingredients to incorporate proteins, vegetables, starches, and little odds and ends is what do you pair with what? And that's where, the real challenge comes from. And also not doing too much. What I find a lot of times, at least for me personally, is I do really well when I go to my instincts and I don't have a lot of time to think. Like at an F1, I've done really well. I've gotten gold in F1. But then at the same competition, I did an F4 and I got a bronze because I overthought it. I tried to do too many techniques because I know I'm like, oh, I've got, 3+ hours. Yeah, because F4 is 4 hours. So I'm thinking, oh, in 4 hours, 4 portions, I could do all these things. But then when you don't nail every one of those techniques, you start to really lose points. Where the F1 menu, my menu was fairly simple, but the level of execution was very high. So I ended up, with a really good result there. And you have menu writing in F4. So is there a flow to the menu? I've done team mystery baskets before where the critique was that our menu didn't have a good flow to it. Like each dish had a different theme per se. It didn't make sense as a full overarching menu, which made sense because when we did it, it was a 3-course. And I think I wrote 1-course menu and my partner wrote 2. And we just were in such a hurry. We just kind of wrote it and turned it in. And we didn't really talk much about how they would flow into each other. So we're not doing a team mystery basket at Tri-C this year, but it's another interesting way to get into mystery basket is if there's a category or a competition that does have a 2-person, and you're experienced in mystery baskets, but there's somebody else that isn't. Do you bring them into it and have them do a 2-person mystery basket with you? I've done a couple of them and they are really fun, but they're challenging as well. You almost need one person to be the lead and the other person to act as the sous chef, although you both get medals equally, no matter what the score is. It's not like an apprentice that you would have in F categories. Now, last year, we did have enough volunteers to have apprentices for the F4s. I don't know at this time if we will, but anyone that's doing any of the F categories, if we have enough apprentices lined up or enough students for apprenticeships, we will provide those, and you'll know in advance. There's certain requirements of apprentices. So apprentices can do a lot of basic stuff for you, running food back and forth, help with setup and teardown. They can move ingredients around for you. They can put things in the refrigerator or freezer. They can open the oven and insert or remove products as instructed by the chef. So you'd have to tell them like, okay, can you pull this out of the oven for me? Can you put this in the oven? They could do basic knife skills, separating eggs, keep things washed and tidy and clean. And one thing is with apprentices is you always want to keep them busy. Okay. But they can't combine any ingredients. They can't finish or decorate any plates. They can white plates, but they can't decorate or finish. And apprentices don't receive any medals, but they're there as a helper. Yeah, Chef Brett says apprentices are complicated. I feel like there's a gray area there. There is a little bit. I know there was some um, last competition we had apprentices, and the one of the chefs had an apprentice use a mandolin, and the judges told him to stop and said, "No, I don't feel comfortable giving, having them use the mandolin because that's not it may not be safe if they're not using a guard, and also that's beyond the basic kitchen skills because it says peeling, dicing, and cutting. So anything that you want a precise cut, the chef should be cutting. Like if you're doing a bâtonnet or you're doing a brunoise as a garnish in a consomme, um, you'll want to do that yourself. But if it's chopped carrots for a stock, the apprentice can do that. Chef RJ said, when we know if we are getting apprentices, we will let you know. Let me talk to the instructors at the college and see what we look like for volunteers. And it's really, Chef, it's based on how many mystery basket attendees we have. So I would like to say that we'll be able to give you guys like a good 3-week notice, 2-week notice about the apprentices, but we'll make sure you know in advance. So I'm not going to go too much into detail on the community storeroom, but there's a basic community storeroom that you can kind of plan things around because it is a mystery basket. So you can plan things around knowing you're going to have onion, celery, carrot, herbs, tomatoes, different things. You're allowed to bring your own spices, which I would advise that you do, because if you prefer cooking with smoked paprika a lot or whatever, the facility may not have that available. One thing that I do is I use it's a little pill organizer you get for your medication, and there's one that has these little lids that snap and seal closed, and I'll put peppercorns and things in that. I stole that from somebody that did the same thing. So you can get like little like tackle box organizers or little things that you can find that you can have them all in one thing instead of having all these like to go portion cups filled with all these seasonings and then they're rattling around on your cart. So just to dive in a little bit more specific on Tri-C. So every competitor is going to have their own 6-burner stove. You have a convection oven underneath the stove. You're going to have a 6-foot preparation table. So the video that I have on the screen, that's at the kitchen that you'll be competing. The K's and the S kitchen, the K category and the F kitchen for mystery baskets are basically mirror kitchens. They're the same. And you can see how there's next to the 6-burner stove, there's a little side table. Everybody's going to have either a little side table or a station to the side of their stove that they have for utensils and all of that. And it's not pictured here, but underneath the 6-foot table, there's 2 built-in racks for tools. So you can have like sheet tray slide into it like a speed rack. And sorry, someone's asking for the link. So you can utilize that to hold your prep, your tools, your sandy buckets, all those kinds of things. And also we're going to have speed racks available on site that will have for every competitor will have a speed rack available to them. And those are great because you can stage your equipment, your tools, have your food on there, have everything unwrapped. And that way, when your time comes to enter the kitchen, you can just roll in and go right into setup. Because what you don't want to do is, whether it's K category or F category, you don't want to eat into your cooking time because you're behind on setup. So anything you can do to have yourself set up, that would be helpful. Like, for example, if you enter the kitchen at 10 a.m. for your setup time, at 9:30, if you want to take your chicken out of the bag and drain off the blood and have it on ice, you could do that. If you want to take all the little caps off of your little ramekins and deli containers and unwrap your stuff, do that. So you don't have to do it in the kitchen. That way you could just roll in and do it. Everyone will have access to refrigeration, but generally in the K categories, because they're so short, you should need to go in and out of the fridge. What I like to do is I'll just have a little half hotel pan with ice and I'll put plastic wrap on it. And that's where I'll keep my chicken stored. I'll take it out, I'll break it down, I'll put it into a little pan, I'll put it back down there, knowing that within 15, 20 minutes, like the breast will be cooked. The thighs, for example, in my demo video, I did the thighs right away. So you're really not keeping anything in the danger zone very long, and you can have things on ice. And when you do your practice run through, try to do whatever you can to not leave your station. So, you know, you could set up a bus tub underneath for your dirty pans, your dirty dishes, and have that organized as well, because the judges are going to look at every aspect of your workflow. Are you just throwing things in there, and is your dirty dish area just overflowing onto the floor, or is everything stacked neat and orderly? So from the top-down view, I'm getting ready to fabricate my chicken, and I have 2 6 pans on the right of my cutting board. One is for chicken breast, one's for chicken thighs. There's a 9th pan there with a Ziploc baggie. So I wasn't planning on using the wings in my dish or the drums. So what I did was I had a little Ziploc baggie already labeled chicken with the date. It was already cuffed. So while I was handling raw chicken and my hands were already contaminated, I could just drop those parts in that Ziploc bag. It's already labeled. And then when I went to wash my hands and sanitize and clean down, now I could just tuck that underneath for future use. So you want to make sure when you compete, just like when we go through certification, that you work like you would in a restaurant. So for example, if you're only using the breast on the chicken, don't just take the breast off, leave everything on the carcass and throw it underneath your station, because that's going to look as an incomplete task. You want to break it down and then separate out the parts. So like I said, I put the wings and the drums in that little baggie. I didn't use it, but the backbone I used for my sauce. And that little 9th pan up front, that was my compost container that I used for the duration of the competition. I had a larger compost container down below. So what I would do is I would, you know, the carrot ends and the little root of the onion would go in that little container so the judges can see it. And if it started to get full, I would just drop it underneath. That way I don't have a big compost container sitting on top of my table the whole time. I'm not really going to run through the video, but you're more than welcome to. It's about an hour and 20 minutes total. There's a little bit of me leading up and talking about setup a little bit more extensively, labeling and everything. And you'll see it's not, there's no cut. It's a straight through run through of every step that I did. And I apologize, the sound isn't great because the microphone I was wearing picked up a lot of the hood system. So yeah, the sound's not the best, but I think it gives a good representation of the start to finish and what that looks like. That's kind of what I wanted to go through. Besides this, the kitchen in Tri-C, so we talked about the stove, the oven. You'll have access to refrigeration. There will be a shared fryer in each kitchen. So if you do want to do something fried, you have that available to you. The grills will not be on, so those won't be available, but we do have cast iron grill pans if you would like to use it. The salamander will not be available. So there are some pieces of equipment that won't be in use. So try and plan mostly around stove and oven. You are allowed to sous vide, and you can bring your own circulator. You're allowed to bring any equipment really that you want. There's not really anything you can't bring. Above each station, you've got 4 outlets of power, standard power, and that's above every station. So you don't have to worry about long extension cords. I always bring like a 2 or 3 foot one with me, just in case, like if I have a little, like I use a little tiny, not a Roku, but you know, food processor. It's just a residential one because it's very small. And so the cord's really short. So I bring a little 2 foot extension cord because, you know, the power's above my head. So it'll reach, I don't have to hold it. So think about those kinds of things. Do you need a stick blender for anything? If you need to borrow anything from the school, let me know in advance so I can make sure it's available. And then we just will track it and make sure it gets returned. So if you do need to borrow plates, we'll have Vitamixes available to use. We'll have KitchenAid mixers available to use. Like Vitamixes, I think we have 2 total. So if you're dependent on it for more than one thing and it's at a very specific time in your run through, I'd recommend bringing your own blender because it'll be available for anybody to use, and someone might have it at that moment that you expect it. But we have plenty of KitchenAids if you need it. For those that are doing cold plated dessert, if anybody is, we do have a blast chiller that will be available for cold plated dessert, but it'll have one setting and you won't be able to change the setting. So it'll just basically be running. So you can go and you can use it, but that'll be like a shared kitchen space. And then, yeah, we'll have pot and pans, you know, pot and pan sink. There's a dishwasher there. just like you'd expect. And so there'll be availability for some shared equipment if you need. And feel free to reach out to me if there's anything specific you're curious about. And that's really it. I mean, we're gonna have load in. There's not much to say there. Like I'll be sending out load in maps and all of that for every competitor in advance, and I'll get them detailed photos of the kitchens and stations to see exactly what the stations look like. The only difference is from what this video that was set up for demonstration, but the prep table will be at a 90-degree angle to the stove. So you'll have the stove right to the left of where you're working instead of having to fully turn around. That way we can have 5 competitors per kitchen, and we have 2 kitchens right next to each other. That's a lot of what I wanted to kind of walk through and talk through. And then I hope that there's some questions and things that I can answer for you here. Chef Ky-wai, I don't have my timeline that I did for the practice run yesterday because I actually saved it at my Tri-C account. So if you could, I know you made copies. If you happen to have that, if you could email it to me. If not, I can email it to the group later. The timeline that I wrote for my practice run yesterday, and my equipment list and my menu, I kind of put something together. But what I want to do is if anyone has,
I got those. I'll send them to you.
Okay, thanks, Chef.
Okay.
If anyone wants, if you're more than welcome to unmute now, and we can, one at a time. If you have any questions that we can go through, or if there's any topics that you want me to dive into a little further, I'd be happy to. Or if you want to put something in the chat. So Brad said for F4, yeah, one thing that's good to note in mystery basket, you have to use every item in the mystery basket, but not the full quantity. So if they give you a pound of bacon, you don't have to use all that whole pound. And Chef Brad, did you have something you wanted to ask? I saw you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, can you tell us more about the student wildcard category?
Oh, yes, thank you for reminding me. Let me bring that up real quick. And then I see Chef Amy Hugh has a question. I'll get to you after this. Okay. All right. All right, so I have it shared on my screen. So essentially what we wanted to do is we wanted to create a category that would closely mirror the Ohio FCCLA culinary competition requirements. And our thought process was it gives students, and it doesn't have to be FCCLA students, anybody could compete in this, any student. But the idea was to give students that are potentially going to the state competition an opportunity in front of another set of judges to compete and practice before state. Because our competition is between state and then the local level FCCLA. So it's an individual student. Competitors will prepare 2 portions of a salad with a handmade vinaigrette and 2 portions of an entree. And it's very similar to the SK requirements. They have 20 minutes for setup. They can, just like before, they can verify oven temperatures, organize themselves, clean wash products, whatever they need to do. It says measuring products because that's what the FCCLA states in their handbook, but we're requiring that everyone bring their ingredients. So you should have everything already measured out in advance. As far as measured out, as nothing can be mixed, just like the K category, but you can have your oil, vinegar, Dijon mustard, and honey already laid out for your vinaigrette. They have 60 minutes to cook, 10 minutes for plating, and 20 minutes for cleanup. Competitors bring all their ingredients. Ingredients can be pre-scaled and measured, but no pre-mixing. And basically the main difference is that from this and an SK is you're doing a 2-course, and you do not have to have your protein brought in whole and fabricate during the hour. Because FCCLA just gives them chicken breasts, and they do chicken. It's always like chicken, rice, and green beans, I feel like. So they can bring chicken breasts in. So that way it gives them the time to do the salad. And the main difference between FCCLA and here is we are asking them to bring their own ingredients. So that way they have all their things measured out and ready to go. And similar to SK, we're requiring a recipe packet and a either diagram or photo of the dish, just like they would for, SK1 and so on and so forth. So that was our something we thought that we would give because we have a robust FCCLA program in the area. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to get some involvement at the high school level for competition. Does that cover everything for you, Chef Brad?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. And then the grading is the same rubric that we use for SK. And I'm going to pull that up real quick just to show you guys this. So this is the grading point scale for the SK category. So this is for student. And everything's always out of 100 points for competition. So if you look of the 100 points, 25 points is for sanitation, work habits, safety, and then utilization of ingredients and cooking techniques. So that's 25% of your score. And then 75% is taste and presentation, and 5% is time. So if you see every minute late, you lose a point. So our medals are based off of the 10-point scale. So, if you lose 5 points for your medal, you're automatically down to a 95. And so you still could, in theory, get a gold if everything's perfect. But most likely it won't be perfect. So those minutes do add up. And it's for the minute late. So if your end time is 11 a.m. and you finish at 11 a.m. and 42 seconds, you're technically on time. It's once it gets to 11:01 is when that minute happens. So you can go over 59 seconds without penalty. Once you go over a minute, well, then now you just lost 1 point. And then once you go over your second minute, it's a second point, if that makes sense. And let me see if I can pull up the professional grading scoring sheet. And K should be pretty similar, if not exactly the same. So here's KC. It expands a little bit more for professionals, but you see 25 points for organization, 25 points for cooking skills and culinary technique, and then 50 points for taste. So it is a little bit different for the KC category. But the nice thing is all of this is available in the competition manual. So there's no secrets as to how they score and what they're looking for. So, this is for F mystery baskets. So you can see that it kind of lays it out. Good. And then Chef Amy, you had a question about the wedding cake?
Yes, I did. I had a couple questions. It wasn't too sure, it wasn't too specific about the time slot.
Okay.
And so I was wondering about that, how much time we had to do the wedding cakes is what I'm specifically on.
Sure. Are you a student or professional?
I'm a student.
Okay. So let me pull up the category. So wedding cakes you bring in completed. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay, that's what they are. Okay.
Yeah. So you don't actually complete those on site. So let's say you sign up for the wedding cake competition or the celebration cake or any of those types. You sign up and then we tell you your presentation time. So we would say, okay, chef, your presentation is 1 p.m. You can come in as early as you need to set up your table and present at 1 p.m. Now, you're not going to have access to like a full commercial kitchen, but we do have a little demo kitchen up front. Like if you need a running water, if you need, it has a stove. So like if you need to heat up.
Oh, I'm sorry. My dog's barking.
Oh, no, it's okay. But like if you need to like heat up a palette knife to smooth out some icing that maybe got in travel got messed up, you could do that. And you could do any decorating on site that you want to. Like if you bring it 95% complete, but now you're just going to add on your pastillage, decorations or whatever. But no, so you would do that at your home kitchen or at your professional kitchen. You'd bring it and just display it. And just make sure that it's all real cake, because the judges will look for that. They'll check it with skewers to make sure it's not a styrofoam base covered in fondant. And so just, they don't eat the cake. And a lot of these cold categories, they don't eat it. So it's all about artistry, your piping, your skill in decorating, your skill in fondant application, whatever mediums you decide to use or whatever theme you decide to go for. That's pretty much everything that they're going to grade you on. So wedding cake is SC. So let me find the grading for SC just to show you. I feel like we're getting there. Yep. So SC, decorated cakes. So you have presentation and impression, evenness of icing, glazing, or fondant, use of techniques, exactness of skills, and knowledge of skills. You notice there's no taste on there. So, but having a menu that sounds really good, that's part of the presentation. The overall look, the flow, the color. So really it's the wedding cake challenge, just like the bread display. It's more about your artistry and less about it tasting good, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Let me go back to the chat. Okay. Okay, wedding cakes. Our judges pre-selected. Yeah, Chef Jennifer, we do have most of our judges are selected. We're still finalizing our list because since we're offering pastry, we are looking for a dedicated pastry judge, and then we're confirming an ice carving judge. Because based on the categories you offer, you want to make sure you have judges that are not only proficient in that area, but qualified to judge that area. So we'll have the judges finalized here soon. What type of desserts are included in the cold plates dessert category? Cold plated desserts. So that would be any kind of dessert that you would like for the cold plated dessert. You could do a semi-freddo, you can do anything really. So when you look at it here, it'll tell you, general guidelines for the category SP. So you read through these, it talks about, just like with savory food, what I tell the students is, you're going to want to have a protein, a sauce, a starch, and a vegetable. That's the most basic foundation of a dish. And then for dessert, it's probably going to be, do you have a sauce or coulis? Do you have a main component? Do you have a garnish or compote or some kind of topping? And do you have a crunchy tuile or a crumble or streusel or cracker? So you want to think of the things that make up a complete composed dessert. So like, I know this is a warm dessert, but a peach cobbler by itself in an hour and 10 minutes may not satisfy enough skill required for an hour and 10-minute cold dessert competition. But is it a peach cobbler that has a homemade vanilla sauce and you were able to make a peach sorbet because you brought in a KitchenAid ice cream maker, and then it has a cardamom tuile on top? I don't know. All right, now you have the components for a complete plated dessert. Chef Brad asked if there'll be china available for F category. Yes, we will have china available. As far as bowls, cups, and stuff, it's always a good idea to bring your own if you'd like, so you know what you're working with. But we will have china available for the competition for F category, and if anyone needs it for K, we can lend it out as well. Tony's asking, is showmanship encouraged during the competition? Any interaction during the competition with judges and competitors? So it depends on the category. So F category, the tasting is blind. So the judges, they're very strict. The judges cannot even know the names of the mystery basket competitors, the tasting judges, that is, because they want to make sure that the tasting critique is 100% unbiased and blind. So they won't even know the names of the competitors, let alone what order that the food's coming in. So those judges are kept sequestered, and they're going to be in a private area away from everybody else. The floor judges will interact with competitors, usually ask questions. They might ask questions while you're cooking. They'll definitely talk to you at the end. And then there's always a really good critique from all the judges, and there's a lot of notes to be taken. If there's a viewer, like if you're an observer and you want to ask a question, I've always seen it where the judges are really respectful of that, but notice that their time is to be focused on the competitors. But if you had a couple of questions, then they're always really good about chatting up and talking with people, especially if at the end of the competition or beforehand. Gabby asks, how many copies of binders with photos, recipes, and timelines do you need? So it tells you that you need to have I feel like it tells you specifically in here. Let me see if I can find it. 4 packets. So you want to have 4. They don't all have to be in binders, Gabby. Even just printed in like a little folder or portfolio is fine. And just make sure you either have a close-up color photograph of the final dish or a diagram that clearly states what each component is, and then the recipes. You don't have to necessarily submit the timeline to the judges or like your equipment list or any of the organizational things for you personally. You can, it doesn't hurt. But they want the photo and the recipe. And the timeline is really for you. And you can't see on the video that I did, but I had a speed rack next to me with binder clips with my timeline on it, my recipe, my dish, just little notes for me. And you notice like I didn't have it on my table. So find a way to get it off of your table if you're going to have any notes or things hung up. Yes, Chef Chris, wedding cake category is similar to cold food as far as you bring everything in advance, like a terrine or pate or anything like that. Chef Jennifer asked if we have to sign up to be a spectator. No, anyone's allowed to come and spectate for free. It would be a great opportunity if you're thinking of competing and maybe you don't want to, get your feet wet this year, but you can come and observe. And anyone that hasn't been to the Tri-C kitchen, we've got in the 2 kitchens that you're going to have, there's all these windows, so you'll be able to see in. And if there's somebody there that you're watching, you should be able to get a good view of it. Judges in the past sometimes will let people poke their head in the kitchen and like stand in the corner and watch. Sometimes they won't. It kind of really depends on the floor judge and what they want to do. But no, for spectator, you don't have to sign up. And then on the, on here, this is our ACF chapter website. It has all the categories. So you can either register by hitting this red box, or if you're an instructor and you're registering multiple students, that's going to be kind of a pain for you. So you could just either pull up the application, which is down here under documents, and kind of fill in for multiple students, or you can email me. If you don't have my information, you can email here, president@acfchefcle.org. And what I can do is if you tell me the names of the students and just what category they're in, then I could just send you an invoice for the whole group. So you don't have to go in and individually kind of register everybody. If you have preferences on what days, whether you'd rather compete on Friday or Saturday, let me know. I'll do the best to accommodate based on the schedule. Right now we have 28 competitors lined up and we could still take more. So we still have opportunities for more people to come in. And then we do have prize money for top scoring. We have professional cash available and scholarship. Let me pull up my note of what it was. So it's going to be top scoring student. It'll be a $250 scholarship that I can send to their school of choice. And then professional mystery basket will be $375 for top scoring professional. And then professional of any other category will be $375. So, which is nice. It'll offset, the competition and give some competitors, the opportunity to make a little bit of prize money. And that was donated by Miners. So it'll be the Miners Chef's Excellence Award that they provided some money for that. Yes, Chef Jennifer, both days have the same competitions currently. We have the kitchen set up where we could run mystery and cake categories on both days. So it should be pretty open. And then any of the wedding cake, cold food, those can be either day because you don't really need a kitchen for that. You just need a table to set up. So anyone thinking about doing any of the cold food categories, those will definitely be both days. Ice carving as well. It depends. I'm going to try and get all the ice carving on one day. Just for ease of execution. But if we have enough interest and we need to do 2 separate days of ice carving, we'll definitely do so. Is there anybody interested in ice carving or do I not need to go into that? At least anyone on this call. So, okay. If anyone is interested down the road, ACF Cleveland chapter has an ice carving club that we started about a year ago. We've got about 7 to 8 regular members that come out and ice carve. If you're a member of the chapter, there's no cost to you to join the club as an ice carver. And we're kind of teaching and learning as we go along. So because of the club, we wanted to make sure we supported ice carving in our competition to hopefully have some goals to work towards. Chef Ky, I know you observed me yesterday for the demonstration at Tri-C. Is there any things that you thought were valuable insights that either you witnessed or things that I kind of reviewed yesterday that you'd like to share with the group?
No, Chef, you did a really good job. It was very thorough. As far as you know, the timeline and at least the nuts and bolts on how it's structured. So it was super helpful. And I texted you those two. I was trying to figure out how to email, but I have those, the timeline and the ingredient list. I just texted to you. So
Oh.
I don't know how to get that to the group or.
Perfect. What I'll do is I'll bring that up on the screen now. Give me just a second.
But the demo was very beneficial to actually kind of see, you know, like concretely what it's supposed to look like. So it was a great job.
Yeah, and absolutely. You know, I recommend anyone that's thinking of competing in a cake category to look at it, especially students. Because the one I did is actually a student, like I said, it's student based. So it was only a 2 portion, but I could easily, you know, you could easily scale that up for a 4 portion. Like I had enough puree and vegetables for 4. Sauce was a little light. I mean, I had a real small chicken, so I had just enough sauce for the 2. And my chicken was small, so I probably would have needed a larger chicken based on the way I did the presentation. So I'm emailing myself the these. I'm trying to anyway. Let's see if it comes up. All right. Sorry. All right, let me see if it came through my email. All right, I'm gonna put it on my screen here. Are you guys seeing the this timeline here on my email? All right, it looks like it, yeah. So this was the timeline, the way that I put it together, and this was just my first run through. So it's going to be potentially a rough timeline at first until you start to practice it. So this is what I had clipped to the side of my speed rack. So at the top, I put my entree, and then I just like to think through the whole step of the dish. And obviously, you have to prioritize timing. What takes the longest? So 15-minute setup, 1 hour cook, 10 minutes of plating, 15-minute breakdown. So again, my timer starts at it starts at 70 minutes. No, it does start at an hour 10. It starts at an hour 10. It counts down. So I have everything here, so it coincides with the timer. So I don't have to do math in my head of, if I said 10 minutes in, I need this completed, but my timer really, that means 60 minutes. Like I don't want to have to think about that. I just want to look at it and know if I'm on track. So, I give myself 5 minutes for fabricating the chicken, icing everything down, getting the bones in the oven, and then like another 3 minutes to sanitize and hand wash. So you could even put mental notes for you there, like a sanitize and clean down. So you make sure that you don't forget. Now we all should be, professionals and know that we always have to clean after chicken. It doesn't hurt to put that on there. And that's why me in competition, I personally always do protein first. Put it away, do a really thorough clean and sanitizing. Now everything else I'm cutting and prepping is vegetable work, and I'm not really touching raw chicken again until the end. But really at the end, I grab the container of it, I use a set of tongs, and I'm using utensils. I'm not really handling it. Or you could use gloves and handle it, wash your hands. So I like to do that first. So you look at that. The next step was cutting mirepoix for the braise and the artichokes. Then I went and seared my chicken thighs for my braise and started the cooking process. You can use a pressure cooker if you want. I did this menu without a pressure cooker. I was able to get it done in time because I started that chicken thigh really, really quickly. Next step was to get the puree on the stove, start my sauce work, start my knife prep for my artichokes, prep my puff pastry. So everything I had a little timeline. And I mean, Chef Ky will tell you, I was pretty much spot on with every marker on here. Was really, really close to when I actually did it. And that's all based on your own personal experience and knowing, your speed and skill set. And a lot of times, even though in my head, I'm like, okay, I can do a chicken in less than 2 minutes. I gave myself 5 because I want to make sure I include cleanup and, you know, whatever in there. I'm in a different kitchen. I'm not working all the time. So I always give myself a little bit of a buffer. So if I run behind, I can make up that time. And that's one thing that's important to note is if I didn't start my sauce until later than I should have, now I know I need to speed things up. Or if I'm ahead of my timeline, now I can slow down a little bit, make sure my knife cuts on, you know, the knife cuts that I want to showcase are perfect. I don't have to try and rush through them and make them inconsistent. So having a timeline really is going to help. And, you know, when I did the demonstration, it was the first time I did this, you know, this full run through. So I was looking at my list a lot. Okay, what's next? What's next? I was kind of glancing at it. But once you practice 3 or 4 times, you really don't even have to look anymore. You just know the steps and you just go boom, boom, boom. You're efficient. And one thing I was talking to the students about is you should look like you have everything under control. Like you shouldn't be running around the kitchen like a crazy person, you know, trying to do everything. But you should move with a purpose and have some efficiency. It just shows that you're practiced and you're confident and you know what you're doing. And it's funny, I was telling the students yesterday, like I had like the competition mindset, like my hands are shaking when I'm plating and I'm like all nervous, and it's just me with a few students. But sometimes when you get to that zone, like it kind of changes, you have that stress going, but it's fun. So yeah, just have some kind of a timeline, and as you practice, you can adjust it and you can tweak it and you can make it more true to life of what it is. Fernando says all my unread emails. So you should see my other inbox. Look at the deleted, Fernando, 2341.
Derek, on that timeline note that you're talking about.
Yeah.
When I was doing it, it helped me because invariably something's going to surprise you and happen, and you're going to kind of lose track. And you got things going. It just helps you recenter and get refocused on where you were. You can go back to what was I working on, right? Begin sauce, and then jump back into.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, anything, and everybody works differently. So whatever you could do to mentally organize yourself will help. I just sent myself my quick little menu. So like, again, like I don't have any recipes done. I just did this for demonstration purposes. I didn't even have a picture going into it, but this is kind of how I would start in my practice. And then I would take a picture when I finished, and then I could write my recipes because I knew how much I had just had done, right? So basically I had my menu again, and these are just really, this was like my shopping list. So when I build my cart, I know all the things I needed to grab. And then equipment down here was stuff that I forgot. So I wrote it down at the bottom. So when I build out my equipment list for the actual competition day, don't forget, I need my cutters, I need my spoons, I need, you know, my timer, my cutting boards, you know, whatever else. So yeah, use that as a working document and take notes and adjust. And with practice, you'll just get better and faster. And then you'll find that you'll be able to do more than you think you could once you practice and get your timeline down. So
hey Derek, it's Matt Dugan. How are you?
Hey, great, Matt.
Hey, question for you. And this goes back to when I took my certification, practical, and everything else. I'm curious because I was docked points for not cooking my artichokes. However, I shaved them on a mandolin. I turned them, cleaned them, you know, showed the proper techniques of not browning them or them not oxidizing, you know, with lemon water and everything else. And I mixed it with a little bit of shaved fennel, some nice shaved Parmesan, and I did a nice vinaigrette, and you know, and did that. What's the thought on that? And I was docked points for not cooking that. Is that something that I should have pushed back on, or is that something, you know, because it doesn't necessarily say you need to cook them.
Right. I mean, did you pass, or was it a?
Yeah. Oh, well,
okay.
yeah. I mean, it was my certification, but it
Right.
said, hey, yeah, I mean, there were a couple things. Obviously, there's always a couple things on there they're gonna grab you for. But one of the things I was sort of, I thought outside the box in
Right.
not cooking them because, you know, in my mind, I didn't want to have to worry about them overcooking and, you know, where I was going to incorporate them. And I thought it'd be nice to shave them into a salad and do something a little different with them. And then I was docked points, and I thought, oh, that's sort of weird because I thought it was sort of a useful technique that you can still do with it. It still tastes good,
Sure.
if you do it right. But
So, Chef Fernando, he's on the call, and he is not only our certification chair, but he's on the national committee for certification. I think he's either the Northeast region or the national chair. I forget. Pardon me if I'm misspeaking. I don't know if Fernando, if you want to chime in on that.
Hi, chefs. So,
hey, how's it going, Fernando?
good. How you doing, chef? So, without knowing the whole background, just based on what you want, I think with certification, and it's completely different from competition, but I think the idea behind what the evaluators might have been mentioning that day is that when the artichoke was part of the menu and it was a requirement for certification, the idea was to show the proper handling, storage, preparation, and cooking.
Mhm.
Even though it didn't necessarily, specifically said, the idea was, and the idea still is, that you want to show the cooking of that. So that's probably where they probably were coming from.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. That's probably what it was. Like Fernando said, without me being there as an evaluator that day.
Chef
to
Matt,
hear
you were
what
saying
it
something,
was.
but I think you were muted.
Yeah,
No, I'm
yeah.
sorry. So now me being as sort of a professional, and if if we're getting them in mystery baskets and using them in that direction, that wouldn't necessarily deduct points for using them that way, correct?
I would say you're correct in that assumption, because if it's delicious and it tastes good and you do something different with it, or you shave it and you fry it, you make an artichoke chip out of it.
Sure.
But yeah, certification, like Fernando said, like the idea behind the artichoke there, because like to your point, you're like, well, I didn't want to do it because it's kind of tricky, and that's why they put it there, because it is kind of tricky to deal with.
It's like lobster. Who wants to break down a lobster? You
Right.
got to do it, but nothing says that you technically have to cook the artichoke.
Right. No, true. And I mean, there's a lot of things in the certification manual that doesn't explicitly say like you have to do this, and that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like,
Implied.
part of it is, getting a mentor and going through the process and understanding. But yeah, I get what you're saying.
Okay. I just thought I'd throw it out there. I thought it was.
I appreciate that. And then Chef Brad asked about the thought process for building your F4 menu. So if you guys don't have this book, I don't know if it's backwards or whatever because of webcam. It's written by Ed Leonard, and I think it's called The Guide, American Culinary Federation's Guide to Culinary Competitions. So this is a great resource for, I'd say it's a really good resource for hot food competition. It has some stuff on cold and some of the other categories, but it's best for hot food, in my opinion. But it talks about the process of building an F4 menu. And, for me, like I said, I try to showcase techniques, but unfortunately I get too wrapped up in that, and that I don't execute them perfectly. I think my first thing I like to do is split up the ingredients into groups of where they make the most sense. Like, does this protein make sense as an entree or as an appetizer course? And really, it's hard to say without what the basket was. So, and I don't want to start to speculate now because I'm in charge of creating the mystery basket for the upcoming competition. So I don't want to give you guys any insight if that's what, and I know Brad would never try and get me to spill the beans early. So I don't want to specifically say anything, but you got to think like, okay, is this a heavier protein? Does that make sense for the entree? Is this a seafood protein? All right, I can do a nice appetizer or soup or something with that. And then I like to pair the ingredients with it and kind of spread it out on my work table and kind of pair things up to what makes sense. Then, like, is there any kind of overarching theme that you could apply to the menu? And just like any menu that you would write for your restaurant, do you start with light and go to heavy? And then showcasing, texture, flavor. There are a variety of components on each dish. I cook more for flavor than just like color, and that's just me. But I know a lot of chefs really focus on the color and variety of color, and I'm more focused on like, does everything taste great together and make sense together? Even if it's not the most amazing visually, but if the flavor is amazing, that's just personally how I cook. Thanks, Tony. Have a good one. Thanks for joining us. But that's kind of something that I like to do. You're always going to get these little secondary proteins. So what do those go well with? How do you pair that with something? If it, do you get like my last mystery basket for F4, I got calf's liver, but I had no beef. So which protein does that calf's liver, what course does that calf's liver get paired with? So I paired it with the rabbit that I got, right? And do you showcase a force meat? And the one thing that I learned with competition is, in competition, you should not be doing something for the first time. So if you're not well versed in mousselines and force meats, then don't go down that path, because it's going to take too much tinkering and back and forth. If you're really strong at pasta making, I wouldn't go in like dead set that you're going to make fresh pasta, but maybe you have the tools available so that way you can, if you have ingredients that make sense. Like if ricotta shows up in there, great, you can make an agnolotti, but if it doesn't, then maybe don't bank on it. I did a 3-course mystery basket in Cleveland pre-pandemic, and I did fresh pasta as my seafood course. I did like a linguine with clams, with some broth and a little piece of sauteed fish on top and a little bit of vegetable work. And that was my seafood course. That one I got a silver on for the whole of 3-course. So I did a salad, seafood, pasta, appetizer, and then I had a beef. It was a ball tip. I had beef for the entree. So that's what I kind of like to do. I like to try and separate the protein out first, put the starches and vegetables and accompaniments with those, and then try to think of, am I going classical with it? Am I going with a twist? Whatever else. And then those that are competing in F4, in addition to getting you a list of all the common equipment, I know we reviewed some of that here, but I'll get you a list. I will also send you in advance a list of the common pantry, which will be expanded from the minimum required one that's in the book, or that's in the manual. And just to give you guys a heads up, part of the sponsorship with Miners is we're going to have some of Miners flavor compounds and things available in the common pantry. So we will have homemade stocks, of course, but there'll be some of the, is it the, jalapeno, chipotle lime, I don't know. We have some things lined up that they asked that we could put out, but they're going to be in the common pantry. So it's up to you whether you would like to use it or not to enhance flavors, or maybe it goes in a vinaigrette and really just add something different to your vinaigrette, add a little depth of flavor as well. So cool. Does anybody else have any questions? I thought this was a really good discussion. Hopefully it was a helpful review for, I know there's some longtime competitors and some students and new competitors here. And if anybody wants to contact me personally, again, you can email. If you don't have my email, it's president@chefsealy.org. And then I'll put my work email in the chat. And you can reach out to me directly about any questions that you have. And then if there's something I don't know, then I will find out from our lead judge. So our lead judge is Alan Neese. So those that have competed in Cleveland before, they know Alan pretty well. He comes up quite a bit. He's down in Cincinnati, Kentucky kind of area. He's going to be our lead judge. And we have a really good judging panel this year. We have some repeats from last year, but not everybody. And then we're going to have some new judges, not new, but new to us. And so I believe we're going to have 7 judges total. So it's going to be a big show. I feel like with the participation we already have and with the other potential people that have chimed in, this will probably be one of the bigger shows in the Midwest, other than the regional qualifier. So great. Any last call for questions? Well, I appreciate everybody coming on. I will upload this to YouTube and have it available for future viewing. If you want to share it with anybody, any students, any friends that are thinking of competing, you can share my information. Watch that video that Chef Ky-wai uploaded onto YouTube for me. The link, I'll put the link in the chat again. Because I think that'll be a good, a good viewing for those that want to compete. Yeah, and then anyone that is competing, thank you for supporting the chapter and supporting competition. And I will be contacting you in the future about, load in scheduling and all those details once we get a little bit closer to our March date. So everyone have a great rest of your evening and be safe. Thank you.
Thanks, Dirk.
Chef Derek, I did have a question. Just
Sure.
I thought about it really quick,
Yeah.
and I think it's because I read on the ACF website, and it has to do with like the continual education hours.
Oh, okay.
Do the competition have something to do, like if you compete in or judge or be there?
Mhm.
Does it have something to do with continual education hours? Because I know that that whole thing changed on how to get continual education hours.
Yes. So if you need CEHs for your recertification or you're getting a new certification, competing does go towards it. Let me pull up because
Chef,
competing falls
so
into a
may I take
certain.
this one?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I didn't realize you're still on. Go ahead, Chef.
So yes, Jennifer. So what happens is competing in so for doing a competition, competing does count towards your CHs, and the number of CHs you get is based on the medal you get, right? So if you don't get a medal, and I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but if you get no medals, you still get X number of continuing education hours. If you get a bronze medal, you get a little bit more. I think it's 6 hours for a bronze medal. I think it's
Yep.
maybe
3.
8 for a silver and maybe 12 for a gold or something like so.
It's 3 for participation, 6 for bronze, 12 for silver, 18 for gold.
Correct. So yeah, so they do count towards your continuing education hours.
Okay, thank you so much.
And then one of the things that they changed, Jennifer, that I think you're thinking of is that of your total CEH hours, 25% have to either be volunteer, leadership, or competition. So,
Yes.
so for example, if you were to volunteer at the competition, maybe you're not competing, but you were to volunteer at the competition, I could write you a 2-hour CEH for your volunteering time at the competition, if that makes sense. So competing gets you a good amount of CEH, but volunteering, not just at that, but at any ACF event, you can get a continuing education credit, which helps you with your recertification.
Okay, thank you so much, because that's what I've had questions about, because I noticed, like I said, the things had changed on how to keep the certifications.
Yeah, up until 2020, it didn't matter where they came from, and then really in 2020, the office decided to make sure that at least some of that came from competition volunteer leadership, because I think otherwise everything just came from online courses, and now everyone has to at least contribute some additional time to ACF, whether it's competition or being an officer or something like that. So all good.
Okay, and if you do want to volunteer, is that something we need to let you know in advance, or you just kind of show up and say, hey, I want to
Yeah,
help?
let me know in advance. I will probably sometime in mid-February, I'll send the chapter an email. We're gonna have like a volunteer list, like, hey, this is what we're looking for. We're gonna need a timekeeper. We're gonna need someone to greet and help unload and load. We're going to need a liaison to the judges. So if the judges need something or need copies made or need something printed, that they can be like a runner for the judges. So once I send that out, you're more than welcome to say, hey, chef, I'm happy to help in any area, or, hey, I could do this or that for this time to that time. Because, I don't expect everybody to commit the entire day. But if you're like, hey, I could do morning time, I could do like 8 to noon this day. I could do a few hours in the morning, and then that's fine too. So.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, everybody, thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.